All right. Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Shonda Cooper Goff. It's such a joy to have you all here. I'm part of the Tigerlily Foundation team, and we're excited to be able to welcome you to our Pull Up a Seat on HER2 positive. We had a campaign last month where we highlighted HER2 positive breast cancer and provided information about that as it was Women's Her Story Month. And so we're just excited to be able to, for you to hear from some of our patient experts to provide some information as well on HER2 positive breast cancer and to be able to create a safe space for us to have these conversations. As we go throughout, this is a safe space for conversation. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat as well as there's the Q&A feature, so you can be able to do that. And when we get to a portion of our program where it's Q&A, definitely raise your hand, unmute yourselves. We really want you to be able to just have a great time. All right, so introductions. I've introduced myself, and I just wanted to share a little bit about Tigerlily Foundation as well, which I will do, and then also our 5 agreements. We're going to, also with our agenda, we're going to I will explain about Pull Up a Seat and our reason for Pull Up a Seat, and then provide a short presentation on HER2 positive breast cancer. And then we'll hear from our phenomenal patient experts, hearing their stories. And then we'll have our Q&A session, time for you all to hear from you and to be able to have that interactive conversation. And then we will receive audience feedback. We'll just do a little summary on that, and then some of our takeaways. So that's how it's going to go today. All right, 5 agreements. How to be in conversation. We ask you to monitor your airtime. Please speak your truth. Speak from your own experiences. Lead with curiosity and not judgment. And most importantly, keep the space safe. Our why. Why do we do the work that we do? And who are we as Tigerlily? Tigerlily Foundation was founded over 18 years ago. Our founder, Mema Karma, was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, and she had to be her own advocate at a very young age. Through that experience of being her own advocate, having to advocate for a biopsy, Tigerlily Foundation was born. And the intention for the organization has been always to educate, advocate for, empower, and support young women before, during, and after cancer. We envision a future where a cancer diagnosis doesn't inspire fear, but it ignites hope for a future. And since March 2019, we've really been working with a lot of our strategic partners on reaching people from rural to grassroots and within our global communities through our following program and initiatives, which I will share a little bit about. But I did want to also, in addition to the work that we do, explain the why that we do, why we do this work. As I shared, it was because of Mema Karma and her experience, what she went through, but it's also because of so many other advocates that are continuing to fight this fight, and some who have transitioned that we still do it on their behalf. And so I just wanted to honor one of our angel advocates who has transitioned and gotten her wings, Sheila Marie Johnson, who passed away from stage 4 HER2 positive breast cancer last week, and who is her body's being laid to rest today, but honoring her and the work that she started, that we will continue to do, which is to provide this educational information, to be able to share about the importance of community working together, the importance of clinical trials, and the importance of being able to advocate for your own self in this process. So I just wanted for us to honor her and hold her and her family as they go through this difficult period, as we continue to also keep that mantle and keep the work going through what Sheila started as well. So I'm going to highlight one of our programs. So we have 4 national programs, but I'm going to focus on one of our primary ones because I did talk about advocacy, and that is our Angel Advocacy Program. Our Angel Advocacy Program provides comprehensive training and access to services and resources for people of color between the ages of 21 to 50 who have been personally or systematically touched by the disease, touched by breast cancer. And through our Angel Advocacy Program, angel advocates have become more knowledgeable about breast cancer, and how to use their time and voices to make an impact. And there are a slew of ways that advocates can be able to do this through participating and joining our Angel Advocacy Program. And I think somebody from my team will probably be dropping a link in the chat to join, or how, if you'd like more information, how to join the Angel Advocacy Program. You are able to learn about building a trusted community of advocates. You're part of supporting peers through, helping to support peers through their own breast cancer health journey, helping to also transform their cancer experience as survivors, thrivers, patients, or caregivers. And there are a lot of opportunities to be able to engage within the community, to have your voices heard locally and nationally, through community engagement, through awareness events, speaking opportunities. You're going to hear from 3 of our advocates today, helping to contribute to breast health blogs, video content, distributing health educational materials, and so forth. Even also using your voice of advocacy to make policy change at the legislative, at a state and federal level through our HEAL Policy Center of Excellence. So that's one of our areas that we provide training, and highly encourage you all to, if you're interested in learning more about it, to reach out to one of our staff that may be writing in the chat or sharing information about the Angel Advocacy Program, or even follow up with some of the advocates and speakers who are on right now. So welcome. And I also wanted to highlight one other program that we do provide, and that's our Pure Cat program. And I believe we have the Pure Cat program director who's on as well, who can share. And that is a series that we provide with different resources. We have free classes from yoga to meditation, sound baths. These are different ways for advocates and caregivers to be able to be a part of a community and receive support. And so that will also be dropped in the chat as another resource for you all, for those who are joining and would like to be able to participate in that. Pull Up a Seat. So Pull Up a Seat started, this is about I believe our 3rd or 4th year doing it. And we host Pull Up a Seat conversations, literally for those to pull up a seat. It's co-hosted by our patient experts to amplify the voices of underrepresented women through candid conversations on topics ranging from racism in clinical trials and practices, to unequal health treatments through all stages of breast cancer, to determining solutions to the highest mortality, to solutions to the high mortality rate of Black women across the country. And so that's why we're here. So just to kick us off, as we start this conversation about HER2 positive breast cancer, I thought it was really important for us to set the stage about what is HER2 positive breast cancer. And so this information, is a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing is based off of information that I received from MD Anderson Cancer Center. And this will set this tone for our conversation, as well as I invite you to write in the chat if you have any additional questions that I might be able to answer. So with that being said, what is HER2 positive? So HER stands for Human Epidermal Growth Factor 2, which is also known as HER2, which is a protein that tells human cells when to grow and when not to grow. HER2 is also a protein that helps breast cancer cells grow quickly. So breast cancer cells with a higher than normal level of HER2 are called HER2 positive. Now, these cancers tend to grow and spread faster than breast cancers that are HER2 negative, and are more likely to respond to treatment with drugs that target the HER2 protein. Some statistics as it relates to HER2 positive breast cancer. As we're aware, breast cancer is the most common cancer in women in the US. 1 out of every 8 women may be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. And so with HER2 positive breast cancer, that accounts for about 20% of all breast cancer diagnoses. With the development now of HER2 targeted agents, HER2 positive breast cancer is now a treatable disease, and outcomes have dramatically improved for patients, which I'm sure you'll be able to hear about more from our advocates themselves. Causes. What causes HER2 positive? So HER2 positive breast cancer happens when the HER2 gene mutates, it changes. This gene makes HER2 protein, and these HER2 proteins, which are also called receptors, are on all breast cell surfaces. So normally HER2 proteins manage breast cell growth and repair. However, they make sure that cells divide as needed to replace damaged or dying cells. So some of the symptoms as it relates to HER2 positive that may cause, which are very similar to common breast cancer symptoms, it's a change in the size, shape, or contour of your breast. It's finding a mass or a lump. It might be as small as a pea, or a lump or thickening in or near your breast or under your arm that persists through your menstrual cycle. It could be a marble-like hardened area under your skin, or it could be a blood-stained or clear fluid discharge from your nipple. So testing for HER2 positive. There are two ways to test. Typically, the first one is the immunohistochemistry IHC test, and that measures the amount of HER2 on the surface of the cell. And that typically is the way that's measured. If that test is sort of inconclusive and you're still trying to figure out if there's more tests that need to be done, that's when the second test, FISH test, which is fluorescence in situ hybridization test, may be administered. And that's a pathology technique that looks at the gene that encodes HER2 to see if there are multiple copies present. This is known as HER2 amplification. So these results will either be positive or negative. Now, what are the treatment options for HER2 positive breast cancer? It really depends. The treatment options for HER2 positive breast cancer really depend on the size of the tumor. Patients with tumors smaller than 2 centimeters with no lymph nodes affected typically will undergo surgery first, followed by chemotherapy and a single antibody targeting the HER2 protein, typically known as Herceptin. If the tumor is larger than 2 centimeters and has spread to nearby lymph nodes, patients will receive 1 or 2 types of chemotherapy combined with 2 antibodies. So that's the Herceptin plus a newer one known as Perjeta. After chemotherapy, patients may undergo surgery to remove any remaining cells, including a lumpectomy, remaining cells through either a lumpectomy, a mastectomy, or reconstructive surgery. So that's some background information on HER2 positive breast cancer. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Well, before I stop sharing my screen, I'm very excited to share and introduce our 3 patient advocates to you, Andrea Hans, Cotilya Brown, and Cassandra Duckworth. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I would love for them to be able to be on so you can see their faces. All right, so you can see their faces and welcome them on board. So everyone, as I mentioned, Andrea, Cassandra, and Cotilya are going to be our patient experts who are going to be speaking with us today. We're delighted to have them. I'm going to ask Andrea if she can go ahead and start us off and just share her story and share more about her journey. And then from there, we'll pass it over to Cotilya and then Cassandra.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is, so I was actually living abroad when I was diagnosed, and I think I was living in a country where English was not the main language, and that made my diagnosis very, very difficult. It was during COVID, and the language barrier was very difficult because I was diagnosed and I basically didn't understand my diagnosis. And I think I then had to come back to the US as soon as restrictions were lifted. And I didn't have insurance when I came back. So there were a lot of complications there. And that basically is what pushed me into advocacy. Was I had to have my first surgery in the country where I was. My lymph nodes were removed without my knowledge, coming back to the US with no insurance, and then having to go through a system where I had to navigate a lot of different things, right? And I think trying to figure out a lot of different things. Fertility preservation, what were my different options, um, uh, the 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 kind of navigating different specialists, because we have to first understand our diagnosis, understand how to navigate oncology and surgery and reconstruction, and it's a lot. And and then you're young and you're told you're too young, but you still have to deal with it all. So it was a lot for me. It was really a lot, but I had to keep going. Um, so I think I'm still kind of processing it all, but I think being an advocate has been really helpful for me to kind of to regain that sense of power that was taken away from me, if that makes sense. um, and um, it's I think there's a sense of control that's taken away that we are able to kind of regain by speaking up for ourselves, or at least for myself. There's so much that we don't have control over, that any kind of control we can have, we hold on to that, or at least I do. So when I can't ask a question, I ask it. When I can push back, I push back. When I can make a list, I make a list. Because so many times I was told, you're too young, and here I am. And I think that's that's um, that's my story. um, so um, uh, I'll open it up to questions if anyone has any questions, because I know that was kind of a lot, but I want to leave it. I'm an open book, and so if anyone has anything to ask, I'll leave it open.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much for sharing and also, being transparent and sharing your story. And I didn't know if, before I just pass it over to Cotilya, if you wanted to share a little bit about how your process of being diagnosed and what those stages, the steps were that led to that, even though it was outside of the country. But as you
Sure.
came back, how did that transfer over that information into treatment options?
Sure. So I think, like so many of other women, I found my own mom, and I went to the doctor, and I again, it was during COVID, and so it was not a time where you wanted to go to the hospital. Um, and I went anyway, and I said, I feel something, and can we get this checked out, because the lump keeps growing. And they said, oh, you have no family history, and um, you're 27, so it's probably nothing. If it's still there in a month, you can come back. And I thought, okay. But 3 weeks later, it it had grown significantly. So I went back before that month was over, and I said, I want an ultrasound. I didn't even want a mammogram. I wanted an ultrasound, because I have a background in healthcare. And they said no. And so I said, I understand that I have no family history and that I'm young, but I'd like an ultrasound. And I went to a different doctor, and they did the ultrasound, and that same day they did a biopsy. And then I was scheduled for a lumpectomy. And that's when things progressed pretty quickly. My lumpectomy was delayed because there were too many hospitalizations for COVID, and nobody was allowed in the room with me because there were so many hospitalizations. And again, no, only my surgeon spoke English, but none of the nurses did. And it was really scary because you're in a foreign country, and you don't understand what's going on. But a month later, I was able to come back to the US, and I had to tell my parents over the phone um, that I had breast cancer. And I remember on the other end, it was just silence. Um, so it was really scary. I was more scared for them because I knew that somehow I could handle it. Um, I didn't know how, but I was more afraid because I didn't have insurance and I knew it was going to be expensive. Um, but yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing that and sharing about your experience. I know we're going to dive into that more too, and we are getting some questions in the chat, so we will ask the questions after everybody has a chance to share their story, and then we'll bring it all together for a facilitated conversation. But thank you for, yes, just opening up and really, being here and being a voice and continuing to be an advocate and using your voice for to make sure that as a catalyst for change as well as being an advocate, angel advocate trainer. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm okay now. I'm healthy. I just want to say that too. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to work with Tigerlily and to be a trainer. And I'm just sending love to everybody because I know that the health system is just frustrating. So sending love to everybody.
Thank,
Yes.
thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to now pass it over to Cotilya Brown, and for Cotilya who is also one of our advocates, to be able to share her story and her journey through her diagnosis and moving onward to some of the treatment that she has had. So welcome, Cotilya.
Thank you so much. Of course, first of all, just thank you for having me and also for doing this. It's such a need, something that we need in our community. As mentioned, my name is Cotilya Brown. I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma at the age of 36 without a family history. My story is similar, has some similarities to what Andrea already shared. So I'll just go through that pretty quickly. I was diagnosed at 36 years old. I found the lump myself in my right breast when I was in the shower. I was told I was too young as well for breast cancer. Um, right away, I was alarmed. I contacted my my primary physician, and one of her nurses basically said, okay, just come in. But she sent me back an email saying, come in, but it's probably nothing. You're too young for it to be anything. I went in. I did not have a previous mammogram because I was under the age of 40. At that time, that was the recommended age for mammograms. Um, I spoke to my primary care physician. She sent me for an ultrasound and mammogram. The results that the radiologist told me it was a cyst and it wasn't something to be concerned about, and that it would likely go away on its own. That was unfortunately incorrect. There actually was a tumor underneath that cyst, which is what my diagnosis reflects, obviously. I had two options after the mammogram and the ultrasound: to leave it alone, that was one option, or to get it aspirated, which basically means they insert a needle in it and remove the fluid and then discard the fluid. I, against my own fear of needles, selected to do the aspiration. And when I went to get it aspirated, it had changed in size. It got larger. And the doctor then, I have Kaiser Health Insurance, so it's not always the same doctor that follows you, but it's all one healthcare system. But anyway, the doctor there, she said, I think we should do a biopsy instead. So she didn't really go into detail as to why. She just said, I think we should do it. So I said, okay, let's do it. She said it was pretty much the same thing. We did the biopsy. instead of the aspiration. 2 days later, she called me back and informed me that I had invasive ductal carcinoma, HER2 positive, estrogen and progesterone negative breast cancer. I do not have a family history of breast cancer, so that also was very concerning. Like Andrea mentioned, the ball got rolling very quickly, very fast. It was a lot to take in, a lot to process, a lot to kind of wrap your mind around. And we expect a lot of our patients, in my opinion, as far as navigating appointments to and from. I didn't have a car at that time, so I used like all of my savings going back and forth to the hospital facility. And then at some point toward the end, I ran out of money, and I had to get like some assistance from them for that. Um, it was a lot emotionally, as well to process. It's very, very scary. You just don't know. And because sometimes these providers do this all day, they're not exactly the most welcoming, right? They're just like, okay, you need to do this. You take your shirt off, get on the table, kind of thing. Trying to condense a lot of time in a very short amount of time. But basically, I joined Tigerlily in August of 2021. I found out about it through Instagram, and I applied and joined that way. One of the best things that's happened to me throughout this journey was finding Tigerlily and just finding a community. I was seeking a community, because I was much younger than all the other women that I knew that had breast cancer. I joined a support group through Kaiser as well. But again, I was like the little niece in the group. Like most of the other women were significantly older. And Tigerlily helped me find my voice, take back some power, like Andrea mentioned, also helped me process things, helped me not feel alone. I found a community online as well on Instagram. But just having in-person experiences and being able to talk to someone that looked like me, that was my age or around my age, that had similar experiences, really helped me get through things. We definitely have a sisterhood here, and it's a language we speak, right? Because we know what the struggle is, and we know where each other has been, even if we weren't there for the journey. I'm now in remission, is what the title is called, or no evidence of disease. That happened for me in February of this year, 5 years of survivorship and 5 years of no evidence of disease, which is an extreme blessing. As mentioned earlier, we have lost some other advocates, and that's always hard. Also another advocate, Koana, we lost her earlier this year as well. So that was very hard. But I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to share my story. And now I am currently pursuing a master's in public health. As Andrea mentioned, it's very difficult sometimes navigating the healthcare system, to try to help other women that are going through this. You don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, right? That's like 4 negatives in one sentence. But the point is that it's extremely difficult. And I don't think that we should take a reactive approach to things, as far as helping people get through this once they have it. We need to educate ourselves and one another as far as navigating something, so that if the time comes and when the time comes, we're a bit more prepared, as opposed to trying to figure it out on the fly. There are a lot of things and programs out there that could help. For example, just like with food costs, or if you don't have health insurance, or you need assistance with rent, there are a lot of programs that we should be aware of that can help, because everything costs, and it's a lot to expect one person who's also the person who's going through the treatment to navigate all of that on their own. So that's it. For now, please let me know if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you, Cotilya, so much for sharing and for providing that context, sharing your story too. And also, I think what's important, like you were saying, and Andrea said too, about not having a family history, but also, and going through this journey and things happening really quickly, but also having sort of on the back end of that now knowing and understanding, okay, what can I do or how can I make it better, improve it for others, and sort of being, you have to get to a point where you're able to, like you said, like, okay, now you're pursuing your master's in public health to be able to even continue to move that forward and to be able to be that voice within not just your community, but also for making sure that other women are equipped with that knowledge so that they are prepared. It's more preventative as well as reactive. So thank you for that. And I know that there are definitely going to be some questions. I know I have a few that I want to ask as well as we get to that section. But if you do have questions about Cotilya's, what Cotilya has shared, please drop it in the chat and we will definitely, bring that up as we get to that part of the conversation. So Cotilya, thank you again for being here and for sharing your story. So I'm going to pass it over now to our final patient expert who is going to be sharing her story this afternoon, and that is Cassandra Ducksworth. Cassandra, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you for being a part of our advocacy community, and we look forward to hearing your story and your journey in this as it relates to this conversation. So thank you.
Good morning, and I'm glad to be here to be able to share my story. My name is Cassandra Ducksworth. I'm 40 years old, and I am a 13-year, I call myself a breast cancer thriver. I actually found my lump myself. I was 27 years old. It was a month before my 28th birthday. So this was in the year 2011 that I made this discovery. And I must say I was not the person who was doing like regular monthly self-exams as I should have been. So when I noticed it, I knew right away that this wasn't right. So the process of my diagnosis moved fairly quickly. We had a clinic on site at my job that I was at the time. And so I made an appointment. I went to the on-site clinic, and the doctor who checked me out, she was kind of concerned about it. So she sent me on immediately to have an ultrasound done. And so my ultrasound came back inconclusive. They really couldn't tell what it was. And then they did a mammogram and it also came back inconclusive. And this was me, 27 years old, having all this done and really not knowing. So instead of letting the hospital continue the process, she sent me to an actual breast surgeon who specializes in breast health. So from there, I was able to get my biopsy, and within a matter of a week's time, I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed with stage 2 invasive internal in stage 2 breast cancer. It just slipped my mind. Invasive internal ductal carcinoma. And I was HER2 positive, with PR and ER negative. And one thing that the breast surgeon told me at that time was it was a positive thing that I was HER2 positive. And I'm like, what do you mean by this? Because this is all new and foreign to me. Like, you have people that you have known who had cancer. And it was like older people. And I was like really the first person I knew. And I was like the first person any of my friends knew at such a young age who had this disease. And it was like a new experience for everybody who was attached to me. So with that, he was like, you were able to, as Shonda discussed, be able to take the Herceptin, which was different from the chemotherapy drugs I had to take. So I was on Herceptin a whole year beyond being on chemotherapy. And with that, I had to have what is called echograms on my heart because the drug is so strong. So I had to get the echogram done and be tested regularly for a heart condition. I'm like, I'm doing all this and I'm only 27. And the fun fact about this, I did have a family history of breast cancer. And you know, you go to the doctors all the time and they ask you these questions like about your family history, and you put these things down. But in return, no one really gives you any feedback on it. So both my dad's sisters had breast cancer, and both of them had it at a young age, like in their 20s, I would say, or maybe early 30s, late 20s, just like me, because I was 27. And so, and you give doctors these information, it's like, well, what do you do with this? If, you know, so somebody should have been telling me I should have been getting like mammograms early on, or I should have been, you know, they'll tell you to do the self checkups, like, but it probably should have been stamped in my head a little harder to do these things, knowing that I had this family history. And nobody would have thought, especially me, that it would have jumped from my aunts having it to jump over to me having it. And I'm not one of their, you know, one of their actual children. So I went through that. I also had a double mastectomy. Um, the doctors kind of really left that up to me as far as what surgery procedure I was wanting to take. My breast surgeon was like a lumpectomy would do, you know, with all the research and everything involved. It, you know, you'll still have it won't be as invasive. You'll still have, you know, your breast left. And then my oncologist was like, I think you should cut at least one of them off. And I was like, you know what? We just gonna do away with both of them. So that was my decision to make on my for personal reasons, that because I did have the family history, and also I think for vanity purposes, because if I'm going in, I'm doing this now just with one, you never know when they come back. I'd want them to look the same. So I went ahead and did that. And I stayed on the chemotherapy drugs for like 4 months. I would go to chemotherapy once every 2 weeks, and then I stayed on it for herself in a year. And so following that, getting my regular checkups and everything, and I discovered Tigerlily around the 2020. This was long after I had done everything. And since then I had moved from Mississippi because I was living in Mississippi, my home state at the time of diagnosis, and now I'm in Louisiana. So I was wanting to, you know, how you say you have like a purpose and things, because it seems like right after I got diagnosed and I eventually told people that I was diagnosed, I kind of became like a spokesperson for breast cancer, especially with young people, or people just asking me questions and things all the time. And it wasn't that I didn't mind at all. Sometimes it can be triggering, but I didn't mind at all. So I was like, this is a part of my purpose in life in some way, for me to still be here and for me to tell my story, especially to young women or whomever who may be diagnosed with any type of cancer, just to give them a little hope. And so I joined Tigerlily. I discovered it online via Instagram, because when I was going through treatment, there was nothing like this around at all. And like I said, this was in 2011, so there was no community. So it was really just me finding information out on my own, kind of research. And maybe there were a few people in the space, but it was not as big as it is now, where people were very open, because I wasn't even fully open for myself as sharing what was going on with me until maybe months later. And people didn't even know that I had cancer, and would be, you know, running to me because I was still wearing wigs. I was like, maybe I should have went through my bald phase or something at that time, but I didn't. So when I was able to find a place where I can be a voice and could advocate, I joined Tigerlily, and I also work with a few other organizations. So I thank God for spaces like this for me to help and assist in also for me to gain knowledge in ways that I can help, even if people don't know about Tigerlily, like I can lead them in the direction that they need to go, or help them to get to somewhere, an avenue where they can get assistance in anything that they need.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, for sharing that. And just, like you shared about community is so important. And also, I think the timing, right? Like through all of that, being able to your experience, but like you said, it has to be at your time and when you're ready or in those right space to be able to provide that information, to be able to say, you know what, okay, I'm ready to use my voice. You have to be in the right emotional space as well. And also, I think it's so great that you're on this panel because you are sharing, you do have a family health history. And then how does that information used? Like we talk about it every time we go to the doctor, you have to fill it out. But what's happening? What's taking place because you're writing that down on a piece of paper? Like, are they actually pushing you and advocating, hey, that you need to come you're under the age of 40, you need to make sure you get your to come and get a mammogram, or are they just sort of letting it go on the fly until you have to come in? So I think there were so many different points that you raised that are just so important, and I'm just so thankful that you're on to be able to share that perspective, and being able to do that from a previous, because you've been sort of, I guess, further along in the process. Your voice and your experiences are so important, and I'm really glad to have you on and to have you as a part of our Tigerlily community. So I'm going to just pin our different different participants, and then we're going to get started. So in our conversation. All right. Okay, and as we go through this, I have some questions lined up, but please feel free, those who are on, if you have a question, feel free to unmute, to raise your hand. I will definitely call on you, or also drop a question in the chat, and we'll get to that as well. Just to kick us off, I wanted to ask you all a little bit about your, did you all have, about your treatment plans? Did you all have any specific treatment plans as a result of your HER2 positive diagnosis? I know that, when we talked to Cassandra, you mentioned one of your treatment options and the impact that that has had, being on like Herceptin, but just wanted to hear from each person, what did your treatment options look like? Anybody can go first if you want to.
Hi, Shonda. My name is Denise, and I was triple positive, and I also want to make a point about getting second opinions, because the first opinion I received, they were going to do one specific type of chemo for me. And the oncologist said to me, well, we'll see how you do 2 to 3 months. We'll do another scan and we'll see if you're responding to it. And my husband wasn't comfortable with that. And obviously, being diagnosed, you're just in a total tailspin and you can't even think clearly, and insisted we went somewhere else. We went to Sloan Kettering, and the oncologist knew they were a second opinion. Sloan specializes by the type of cancer, unlike other just general oncologists, which I appreciated. And she expressed to me that I only had a 40% chance of coming out of chemo and surgery cancer-free, given it being triple positive. And at Sloan, they wanted to throw the kitchen sink at it and go much more aggressive. I don't have 2 to 3 months to see if I'm responding to it. So I did 4 rounds of AC, andromycin, and some other drug, and then 12 weekly Taxols, but the Taxol gave me pneumonia, so I had to stop that, which was very upsetting. They switched me to vinorelbine, which is for lung cancer, but it can be used for breast. I did end up missing a few chemos, though, which was upsetting, and I was scared. And also did Herceptin Perjeta for a year. and had a double mastectomy. But I mean, I think I'm very grateful to have the ability to get a second opinion, because I'm very comfortable with that decision and the choices that those doctors made.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise. That's such a great point too, about share. Thank you for sharing your story as well as your treatment, what you've gone through, and also just being able to, you know, have to advocate and be able to get a second opinion. I think that's something that Andrea also mentioned too about like getting a second opinion, and the importance of that, where you aren't fully satisfied or you don't feel comfortable with what the doctor is saying, but being able to advocate and be able to say, you know what, I need to go to somebody else because I need to be able to, this isn't, I think that there's something deeper here and I need to get a second opinion. So that's something that we definitely do talk about as well. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up. So yes, in addition to, I guess to that conversation of what Denise is sharing too about her different treatment plans, what were some of, Cassandra, Andrea, Cotilya, what are some of those treatment plans? What do they look like for you? And then I also am interested, and we're going to get into it a little bit, about side effects as well from some of these treatment options. So just wanted to hear if it's, you sort of had this similar plans, or what options were you provided when you received your diagnosis?
I was on TCH, chemotherapy, Taxotere, carboplatin, and Herceptin. And I was on Herceptin for a year. About, I'd say 7 months in, while I was on Herceptin, it was changed to Kangenti, which is the generic version. Because another part of it, I think someone mentioned earlier, was the cost of these medications are very expensive too, right? So at the time that I was on it, I think Herceptin was like $5,000 a bag. And I know that just from reviewing the medical bills, etc. And Kangenti was still like $3,000 a bag, but I was on that every 3 weeks for an entire year. And I experienced some of the things I think that Denise mentioned, which is getting sick from some of the medications, having to either delay or cancel some of the chemotherapy sessions, and then also being afraid of, what that means. Does that increase my chances of, difficulty, and or how does that affect, my mortality, etc. So those are also things that we should take in consideration. But also, like Denise mentioned, it's good to be able to have a second opinion. And that's, of course, comes in with the importance of insurance, because everyone doesn't have that option.
So I had a combination of surgeries, radiation, and then targeted therapy drugs. I won't go into the specifics because I think every case is like very different. There were side effects, not to the surgeries, but to the radiation and the therapies. But what I will say is that it's really, really important, if you're not doing well to something, there are always alternatives. And you don't have to, like, communication is so important with your team. So even with the surgeries, it's always okay to say, this isn't working for me. Can we do something else? I'm not doing well with this dose. Is there another alternative? I know that this is what you specialize in, but is this the best option for me? Because there were times when something didn't seem right, and I was nervous to say something, and then I thought, no, I can't keep, I can't live like this, and I have to say something. And then I did, but I would meet women in the waiting room who weren't doing well, and they were like, I don't know if I can say something. And so I just think it's really important to say, as Denise, I think, said, get a second opinion. I got 4 opinions. I didn't just get 2, I got 4 before. I think after that experience where my lymph nodes were taken away and I didn't even have the option to say something, I got 4 opinions. And so if something isn't working for you, say something, because they will just keep going. So that's just what I will say.
For me, I was basically on the same drugs that like Cotilya was on. I did the carboplatin. I was on the Taxotere. I was doing those every 3 weeks for about 4 months, I think it was. And then I was on Herceptin for a year. I also had to take Decadron, which is a steroid to like, I guess to ward off any side effects. And one thing a lot of people don't talk about is weight gain you can have with being on treatment, because they were loading me up with steroids. I would have to take it in pill form, like the night before I would go to chemotherapy, and then the day of, I would get it in my port through the IV. So it was a lot of steroids, and I also was on a Lupron shot. Um, and my oncologist put me on that because I was so young. We didn't really discuss having like egg fertilization, but she said it would help me in the process so I wouldn't go into like early menopause, and like to it helped to conserve the eggs, and so I wouldn't go into early menopause like while I was on those chemotherapy drugs. Yeah, so those were the drugs that I was on. And another thing that Cotilya mentioned was like the cost of Herceptin. And I would say I had a good team at the cancer center that I was at. And so like they had like this financial department within the cancer center itself. And so I'm not sure her exact position, but she was the person who like had led me into discovering like different grants and organizations that could help me pay for the drugs that were on. So I qualified for, I guess it was like a grant or whatever, and they were actually paying for my Herceptin drug, which was a great thing. Like they really helped me, and that's why I tell a lot of people to ask about that when they are going through treatment, because those bills when you get them, you look at it, it's like astronomical. Like whoa, like it's you see how, and especially if you don't have insurance. I had insurance, pretty good, decent insurance with my job. But for people who don't have insurance or don't have the financial resources, that's a burden in itself, along with, going through a diagnosis on its own. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Cassandra, for sharing that. And all of you, Andrea and Cotilya. I do, there's some questions in the chat because I want to come back to, because I know Cotilya mentioned it, but about some of the resources, the financial resources as it relates to some of these costs and how we can find some of these. But I'll come back to that because I wanted to at least be able to answer some of the questions that we've received in the chat. The first question we had received, it was from Kendra, and it was for Andrea. She was asking about any insight into getting care internationally other than the language barrier, based off of her own interest of sort of, wanting to retire internationally instead of staying local, staying in the US. So do you have any insight that you might be able to provide her and to the rest of the group as well?
So I get this question a lot because a lot of people talk about the cost of living in the US increasing, and so they want to retire internationally. And I do understand that. The only advice that I give is wherever you decide to go abroad, make sure that you either can speak the language or that the language that's spoken wherever you're going, that English is spoken well, because if you need to go to the hospital, you want to make sure that for example, like if you fall off a bicycle, or you cut your, finger when you're cooking or something, and you need to go to the emergency room, that they're able to treat you, right? And we're used to pharmacies being open 24 hours. That's not the case everywhere. And so there were a lot of times when I needed to go to the pharmacy, and a lot of pharmacies are just open until like 6 o'clock at night, and then they aren't open until like Monday morning. So that's the other thing, like pharmacies and hospitals. And the other thing is, and just we have to accept that it's not like that in other places. The other thing is, keep your American insurance, keep your insurance in the US. For people who are over 65, you have the option of Medicare, so you'll always have Medicare. But if you're like studying abroad, or you're, for whatever reason you're under 65, find some kind of international insurance that you can, or just buy insurance in the marketplace, something. But make sure that if you want to come back to the US, have an insurance in place. And the other thing is, check to see what kind of infrastructure they have in place wherever you're going. Because even though we think of, they're just, health systems are different everywhere. And so it's just something to think about. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thanks, Andrea. That's great advice. And also for having lived abroad too, those are some really great points that you shared too, about what do you think about these things, health resources, access, language barriers. Those are things that you want to think about, especially as you are thinking about retiring. So thanks for sharing that. We have another question. This is from Jennifer. This is regarding the second opinion. Who do you reach out to? Like, do you reach out to a cancer center or a hospital? How do you go about trying to get that second opinion? So for our patients that are on, or patient experts, how did you go about getting that second opinion? Did you just call up someone? How did that process work for you?
So I always check through my insurance. So it's the easiest way to make sure that you're staying in network and that it's going to be covered. So you can just, like, let's say you have Aetna or Blue Cross, whatever, you go through that portal and you just, let's say if I'm looking for like a family physician or a primary care physician, or I'm looking for an oncologist, or I'm looking for a general surgeon or a plastic surgeon, whatever, I go through that portal, and then you can filter by specialty, you can filter by location, and then you can sometimes even see if they're accepting new patients or they have openings. So that's easiest, because you want to make sure it's going to be covered.
Cotilya or Cassandra, did you all do any second opinions or any of that, or were you comfortable with who you went to initially?
I didn't do a second opinion because I have Kaiser, and it would basically have to have been another Kaiser doctor, or I would have to have paid out of pocket for which I wasn't able to afford. So I just went with what I had.
It could be another Kaiser doctor, but even, for example, just another, like a fresh set of eyes too. So sometimes it just helps to have like a fresh set of eyes. And the thing is, sometimes I talk to people and they say, but I don't want my doctor to be offended. They won't. And it's not about them. It's about you.
Yeah, very important, because you're the one that's dealing with it and going through it.
It's your life. Yeah, it's your life.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. So I know that, we talked about it, we shared a little bit about it. I wanted to go back to that, was talk back to just the cost and the assistance. And so some of the learnings that I would love, because I know each of you are in different locations across the US right now. So if you could share, I guess, where you're located. I know that, and where you're located and where is that your location of where you were when you were diagnosed. And then also, how are you able to find resources that helped with food or financial assistance, all these different areas that you needed? Was that something that was readily available, or did you really have to search for it? Yes, I'm gonna open that up to you all to answer that question.
Hello,
Oh, hi. How are you, Katrina?
I'm good. I was fortunate enough to go through the VA for all my treatment because I'm paramilitary. So I'm sorry y'all have that burden of paying. You know, it really breaking my heart right now. Listen to the people saying that they really had to foot that bill like that, plus going through what they went through. That's why I'm trying to join groups so I can help pay it forward. You know, to help somebody that need the help. Because fortunately, I didn't really need the financial help. You know, because I was military and the VA actually paid for everything. But they didn't, only thing I found with the VA, they didn't tell you about the outside groups for support. So me looking and joining different groups trying for support because what you went through and your friends can't understand what you went through. So you need somebody to talk to when you're having a bad day about what you went through, because sitting in that chair for 8 hours, I call it swallowing. Swallowing that chemo is not for the weak and the faint at all. So if anything I can do to help anybody, please let me know. That's it.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We'll definitely be following up with you on that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To answer the question, I live in Washington. Well, I live in Alexandria, which is right outside of Washington, D.C., and I was diagnosed and I lived in the same place. There are a lot of different resources. I think it's for me, it was a combination of the two. Some things I had to search for, and some things I didn't have to search for, if that makes sense. I basically was like crying out in some ways. So for example, with not having transportation to and from, running out of money for that, I told that to my oncologist, and he said he would connect me to a social worker that works at Kaiser that could help me with the cost of transportation back and forth. So that was helpful. In my support group, like Katrina mentioned, I didn't know. I was stressed. Someone else mentioned it earlier. I was very stressed out when these bills were coming in, right? Because like Cassandra mentioned, they are astronomical. Some of them are like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 at a time. And I went to the support group through Kaiser, and I was like, how are you guys paying for this? Like, how is anyone paying for this? Because I don't have this. And someone there told me about the medical financial assistance. So then I had to apply for that program, and then Kaiser started to help me with the cost of most things. And then I think Andrea also mentioned fertility costs. So Kaiser did not cover the cost for fertility. That also is extremely low. And my oncologist mentioned that I needed to do that in order to preserve some sort of fertility moving forward, as I do not have children, and I did not have children at the time either. So I think it's a bit of that, but I also think that the last thing I'll say is two things. You can contact the American Cancer Society. I also contacted them for assistance, again, to and from radiation. They provide a certain number of rides to and from radiation, and then also just look online for grants and programs that are available, which again puts the burden on the patient to do. Maybe you can have like family or friends help you looking online as well, but it's important to try to reach out for help if you can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Cotilya. Andrea, did you want to share something as well or add to that?
Sure. I'm in DC now. And so not far from you, Cotilya, Alexandria. At the time, I was in a city called Budapest, Hungary. So very far, very foreign. And then to be honest, I don't remember. So much happened. I don't remember. Let me think. I think I was very lucky because but it was a lot of work. Um, I'm getting a stress migraine. Like what? It was a lot of work. I really had to I wrote a lot of letters. Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But in the end, I didn't have to pay a lot out of pocket. But it was a lot. It was like a full-time job on top of my full-time job, and no one should have to go through that. And so that's kind of what I talk about now is the financial burden that we place on patients. So, but I was lucky. So, but there are a lot, but that's the thing. There is a lot of financial assistance out there. It's just that you have to know where to find it. You have to know where to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I don't know, Cassandra, as well, if you wanted to chime in, or how was it with you going through your journey?
For me, right now, I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but when I was diagnosed and going through my treatment, I lived in Jackson, Mississippi. For me, the financial rep who was in the cancer center was the really star of the show of helping me, providing me with the information that I had to complete to get the financial assistance to help pay for my chemotherapy drugs and the Herceptin drugs. Now, if it was not for her, it was a lot of that probably would have gone on unnoticed, because I'm not sure how or where they could have gotten that information from, but she did her job. I must say that. For little things like kind of outside of paying for the drugs that I had to take, like I did like Google searches on my own. Like I found like an organization who sent out like head scarves to people for to help cover for you being bald and things like that. I found an organization who like gave stipends for food for grocery that helped out. And I also, it was another one I did, the little bulb holders. It was an organization that who made those themselves. It was someone like on the behalf of a person. She had passed, and they started an organization like to give out those things to help, just to have necessities like for after surgery, for the little bulb holders that you have for after having a double mastectomy, things like that. So those things I found on my own. So between that, my own personal searches, and the financial advisor, that's how I was able to pay for different things.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for sharing those perspectives as well, and from different locations. I mean, similar locations as well as like different places in the city too, and across the country, and how that's beneficial. I think one of the things that you're sharing too about it is, unfortunately, that there's burden that is on the patient, but we are, trying to make sure that we have these resources and they're in one place, or be able to share that, so we can be able to, so that our advocates, or those who are going through treatment, don't have to, look in all these different places. But it's true, there is this sort of trying to do that own research, and then also you're fighting for your life, you're trying to be in a good mental space, but then you're also having to deal with, like you said, all these different bills that seems like, it's sort of a full-time job, just trying to focus on that as well. So speaking of that, and just, I guess, the mental health component, but also speaking about, I know that you are at different stages of having gone through treatment. Cotilya, like you said, you're 5 years, 5-year cancer free right now. Cassandra, it's been 13 years for you. And just trying to hear from you, how's that journey of survivorship? How has that been, and how has that continued to for you? Like how are you dealing with that? Because like you said, you have to continue to go for checkups. There's still some things that you have to do. So it isn't that you're completely away, it's away, but at the same time, you're still having to do these maintenance and routine checkups. So I just wanted to hear about that journey for each one of you of survivorship.
For me, I guess it's still a roller coaster, and I would tell you why. Because another thing a lot of people didn't talk about when I was going through those years ago was the mental aspect of the journey. And so nobody really talked to me about like, you know, getting counseling or therapy about the things I was going through. And I think I was more so, everything was like during the process, and I had my community of friends and family there. And I think I was more in a fight or flight mode. So my whole perspective on thing was like, I got to get through this. I'm going to beat this. It was like staying positive, but I didn't give myself that space to grieve. So I would say years into the journey is when I started kind of to break. And that was a whole experience because I was like, it was like I guess you would call it like, I guess PTSD in a sense. Like you're triggered by so many things. Like I would want to talk about my journey with people or who would ask, but it became so overbearing. And so that's another reason I, you know, kind of led me into being an advocate, because initially it was because there was a community of people, while even though we were around the same age and I had gone through a lot of what they were currently going through, it was a community I could relate to. And so not having that community then and not having the therapy I needed, it gave me a path to say, hey, I might need to go through therapy or to get additional help so that I can, you know, continue to navigate, because things happen. Because like after so many years, like when I moved to Louisiana and I told my oncologist I was moving, I probably was like, I moved here in 2018. So I was about 7 years out at the time. And I remember telling her in the doctor's office, like, I was like, what are we gonna do now? You know, I'm finna move and all this thing. And I was, you know, kind of hoping like, you know, like a plan or something. And she just gave me the biggest hug and she was like, I can release you. And I was like, what? I'm like, you just gonna throw me out there in the wild? It's like, we're not gonna see each other every like 6 months or something. And so, you know, in that time, so many new things have developed and so many, you know, trials and everything has come across. So as far as the treatment and care plan or everything, so it's like you get less and less, they back off of you less and less. And when I got here in Louisiana, I got a new OBGYN and she was just referred me to one of the oncologists here to speak with her and to a breast specialist. I do continue to see a breast specialist like once a year. But like the oncologist, she told me the same thing, my oncologist, but she was like, right now it's just time for you to live. Like, you know, you just can't live in that fear anymore. Like that's all we want you to do. And, you know, she showed me like the paperwork of like all the new information that came out about like the diagnosis I have and how the survival rates and everything. And like I'm like now beyond these marks. So it's like me basically like just taking things out on my own and having doing stuff like that for myself. Like, and if I feel anything to, you know, do like I did initially the first time, go get it checked out, you know, and I kind of like had a scare last year because I did feel something different. And it come to find out one of my implants had birth. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, so it's doing that. It's just trying to release that fear and trying to get you like a coping mechanism or it's like some kind of process to begin your healing so you won't let that fear override you for the long haul.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like you said, that letting the fear override you for the long haul, but also that and expressing and just your journey, being very vulnerable about what it looks like, at what times you've sort of had that, like you said, PTSD, or you start reflecting on some of those things, what has happened, what's happened to you, and trying to process everything. And the importance of also counseling and looking for a therapist and trying to work through that and talk with someone who can be able to, a medical professional, to be able to help you to navigate those thoughts and navigate how you're feeling as you try to process that. And as your journey continues, to not live in fear, but to, you said, like they said, live, just live. So just, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Uh, I, also wanted to invite Cotilya as well as Andrea to share too about, how has it been for you navigating this basic?
It's been challenging, right? Like most of the aspects of the journey. I think I would definitely concur with what Cassandra said. It's certainly a roller coaster, right? There are a variety of aspects that play a part in that. One might think, oh, when you're done with chemotherapy, you should be excited about that. And while you are excited, it's kind of like, okay, well, you don't need to see us every 6 months now. We're going to go to every, or once a year. And now I have one more appointment with my oncologist, and then that's it. And he's like, well, yay, you made it. Like you went through. And while that is true, I'm also just like, well, wait a minute. We've been in this relationship now for 5 years. Like we're together. Like we go together now. That's it. There's no breaking up with me. What do you mean? And so it's a lot. I had a therapist before I was diagnosed. So when I was diagnosed, my primary care physician sent a message to my therapist, and she called me immediately, and we scheduled, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm very grateful to have had her be able to help me navigate through it. I think it was someone else, Katrina, I think, mentioned that it's hard. Family and friends don't really know what it's like, and you can share with them because you're used to sharing with them and you're used to, going to them for support. But it can also, I think Cassandra mentioned, it's very overwhelming, and you don't want to burden them with all of these things that you've had to go through and all of these fears that you now have, right? It's like an unlocking of new fears, and trying to navigate that. And to be honest, I think even at this 5-year mark, I'm just now starting to process some of the things, right? I'm just now like, wow, I really had breast cancer. Like, how is that even a thing? Like, how did that even happen? And I think that's also why it's so important to do things like this, to provide and be a resource. I think helping other people with some of the things that I've learned, little nuggets I've picked up here and there, is one way for me that helps me, in my own journey, but also just helping someone, like someone mentioned, on the bad days. There are some days that can be bad, whether it's from the medication or you just don't feel, or you're in mourning, like, wow, this has happened to me. I didn't ask for this, and I got into this, and I don't know how to get out, or they're telling me all of these things, and there are side effects from all of these medications. And there's no guarantee that you'll experience them or not, but the point is that there's a lot to take in, it's a lot to digest, it's a lot to come through, it's a lot to accept. And navigating that, in addition to your own facing your own mortality, etc., is very challenging. I mean, we're talking very young women having to do, I had to sign some paper. I mean, they have like a living will you have to do all these things before surgery, which is pretty standard. But if you're having multiple surgeries and things of that nature, it can really be a process. And it's almost like I look like the same person, but I'm not the same person, right? I feel like the same person in some ways, but I also don't, right? Then there's also a physical aspect as well. I had a lumpectomy as well, but then I had they took a lot out. So my breasts are not the same size anymore. I think someone mentioned that earlier. And then trying to navigate that, right? Having to wear prosthesis or not, trying to figure out if I wanted to, get corrective plastic surgery, etc. So there are a lot of things that are in this kind of like soup pot, if you will, right? And navigating it all, you know, is very challenging.
Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that I think, you know, like Cassandra and Cotilya were all kind of saying really similar things where it's a roller coaster, talking about grief, talking about how, you know, there's this feeling of maybe, you know, feeling like we should be happy, but then also now what? And, you know, being thrown into the wild. And I don't know how it was for either of you, but I didn't really understand survivorship. There was no discussion of it, definitely not for my medical team. And so I didn't know what to expect. And I really feel like it should be talked about more. I mean, I feel like it's talked about in the community, but I would love if it could be a conversation in like with our oncologists, you know, like, okay, we're done now, you're done with treatment, but this is what is going to come next. And I understand that appointments are short and we don't have a lot of time, but it's such a big part of the process. And I use the word process because survivorship is a process. It's not, it's going to be, it's a part of who we are now. It's going to be an ongoing thing. It's going to be a roller coaster. There are times when I'm okay. And there are times when I'm not. There are times when, like, just like grief, like there are times when, you know, I think the hardest thing is I've lost so many friends, and each time it hits. And I think grief has just become such a big part of my life now that I'm trying to understand. I still don't really understand it, and I'm trying to, right? So yeah, there are times when I'm like, I think that's how I could describe it, and that's how I can describe survivorship. It's a roller coaster, it's a process, and we need to talk about it more because sometimes I'm okay, and then sometimes I'm not, and that's okay. And I'm still learning. So yeah, like someone said, I'm grieving. Yeah, I'm grieving too, and it's hard. But I'm trying to be patient with myself, and I cry a lot. So that's okay. I didn't used to, and I do now. So I just accept it.
It's cathartic, you know, it is. And
Yeah, it is.
it's cathartic. And I, you know, just want to hold space for you all and applaud you too for sharing about this portion and the day to day, what you're going through and and just being very authentic and real about what your day to day looks like. And how that journey of survivorship is one that ebbs and flows and that you do have those waves. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are in the chat who are also relating to what you're sharing and saying too. And I know that one of my colleagues, Belinda, did put in the chat too a mental health resource guide that we put together that for those who are interested in trying to see, you know, about getting some additional support, that is available in the chat too. And we do have, I just wanted to share for those who have gone through our Angel Advocate program, we do have a monthly support group that we recently started, Empower Chats, where you can come and just have a conversation as a safe space with other advocates to talk about different topics. And that's facilitated by Belinda, who is a licensed oncology social worker, who is a part of the Tigerlily family, to be able to have those conversations and talk about these things because it is important for us to have these conversations. And I know that we are, you know, getting to the, you know, wrapping up because it's almost 12:30 and that's the end of our time together, but I really want to thank you, each of you, for opening up, and thank you to those who are also on the call who have shared their experiences, because this is, these are your life. This is your life. This is your story. Also, as this is just what you were talking about, the survivorship part. It's, you get off this call and then you're like, wait, that isn't separated. This is actually me. It's not someone else that I'm telling their story. It's me. So to open up and share is, I applaud you. Thank you for that. Thank you for the vulnerability and being able to do that. And also, I hope that you have also been filled and are fulfilled and replenished as you have shared and poured out those emotions to us as well. So just thank you for each of you for your time and for sharing about your journeys with HER2 positive breast cancer and survivorship, sharing a little bit about those side effects. I know we did put in the chat to some of your Instagram handles. So for those who would like to follow up with these phenomenal women, please do that. And we will also be sharing this recording. It'll be available on our YouTube channel in a few, probably in the next week or so you can be able to come back and watch it. And I invite you to, at the end, when I close this off, there will be a survey that pops up, a few questions, just if you can take the time to complete that. So thank you all so much. And as if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to Tigerlily Foundation. You all are all part of our community, and we are here to be a resource to you, to help to support each and every one of you that are on this call. So thank you all so much, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.